The security team at the Family Feud studio moved first. Two men in black polo shirts stepped forward from opposite ends of the stage when a woman in the fourth row of the audience stood up, climbed over the person next to her, walked down the center aisle, stepped past the barricade rope, and walked directly onto the set during a live taping on September 6, 2024. She was 36 years old. She was wearing a gray coat. She was holding a manila envelope so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The security team reached her in 4 seconds. Steve Harvey reached her in 3. He put his body between the woman and the man standing at the family podium, a 38-year-old electrician named Marcus Devlin from Chattanooga, Tennessee, who had stopped breathing the instant he saw her face. Steve held up both hands, one toward security, one toward the woman. "Nobody moves," he said. His voice was not loud. It was low, controlled, the voice of a man who had read something in the woman's eyes that security had not. She wasn't angry, she wasn't violent, she was terrified. Her hands were shaking so badly the manila envelope was vibrating. The audience, 206 people, had gone from confused to frozen. Marcus Devlin's mother, Denise, standing behind the podium, said, "Oh Lord." Marcus's brother, Terrell, put his hand on Marcus's chest. Marcus said one word, "Shayla," and Steve Harvey heard it and turned to look at him. And in that single second, watching Marcus Devlin say his ex-wife's name, Steve understood that whatever was inside that envelope was going to change everything. Steve said to the producers, "Kill the clock, we're stopping." The stage manager pointed at the schedule. Steve said, "I don't care, stop it now." The cameras kept rolling. They rolled for the next 47 minutes without a single commercial break. And what they captured was later described by a senior producer as the most difficult and most important footage in the show's 28-year history. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. Marcus Devlin and Shayla Richardson met on September 2, 2012, at a Labor Day cookout on the east side of Chattanooga. He was 26. She was 24. He was standing by a grill, arguing with a friend about football. She was sitting on a cooler, reading a paperback novel. He noticed her because she was the only person at the cookout not talking. He walked over and said, "What are you reading?" She held up the cover without looking at him. Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon. He said, "Any good?" She said, "It's the best book ever written." He said, "Bold claim." She looked up. He was tall, broad, sunburned from work, holding a paper plate with too much potato salad on it. She said, "Can you even name another book?" He said, "The Bible." She laughed. He sat down on the grass next to her cooler and stayed for 3 hours. He didn't eat the potato salad. He forgot about it. It sat on the paper plate in the sun, and by the time he remembered it, the mayonnaise had turned, and he threw it away. And Shayla said, "That's a metaphor for something." And Marcus said, "I have no idea what a metaphor is, but I'd like to take you to dinner." They married in 2014. Small ceremony. Greater Works Baptist Church on Dodds Avenue. Shayla wore her mother's dress. Marcus wore a suit he bought at Men's Warehouse with a coupon. Their son, Caleb, was born in 2015. Their daughter, Ivy, was born in 2017. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Brainerd Road that was too small from the day Caleb was born and impossibly small from the day Ivy arrived. Marcus worked as an electrician for a residential contractor. Shayla worked as a receptionist at an urgent care clinic. Combined income, $54,000. Rent, $920. Daycare for 2 children, $1,400 a month. More than the rent, more than the car payments, more than everything except the feeling that they were building something, even if they couldn't see it yet. The marriage ended in 2020, not with a fight, not with an affair, not with the things people expect when they hear the word divorce. It ended the way a bridge fails, slowly, structurally, under weight that was never visible from the surface. Marcus worked 6 days a week. Shayla worked 5, then picked up Saturday mornings at a second clinic to cover the daycare gap. They stopped eating dinner together. They stopped talking about things that weren't bills or schedules or who was picking up Caleb from t-ball practice. Marcus started sleeping on the couch because he came home at 11 and didn't want to wake Shayla. And then the couch became where he slept, and the bedroom became where she slept, and the 2-bedroom apartment became a building where 2 people occupied the same address and shared 2 children and a mailbox and nothing else. Shayla filed in March 2020. Marcus did not contest it. He told Terrell he wasn't surprised. He told his mother he was fine. He lied to both of them the way people lie when they are ashamed, not of what happened, but of the fact that they couldn't stop it. The divorce was finalized in August 2020. Custody was split, week on, week off. Marcus moved to a studio apartment on Rossville Boulevard. The first night without Caleb and Ivy, he sat on a mattress on the floor and stared at the ceiling for 4 hours. He did not sleep. He did not cry. He just lay there and listened to the silence and understood for the first time that loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the presence of space where people used to be. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. The divorce was quiet. The aftermath was not. In November 2020, Caleb, who was 5, started wetting the bed again. Ivy, 3, stopped talking to Marcus during his custody weeks. She would talk to Shayla, talk to Denise, talk to the television. But when Marcus spoke to her, she turned her head away and said nothing. A pediatric counselor told Marcus this was normal adjustment behavior. The counselor used the words transitional regression and attachment disruption, and Marcus wrote them down on the back of an envelope because he didn't have a notebook and he wanted to look them up later because he needed to understand what was happening to his daughter in language he could hold. By 2021, the custody arrangement had started to erode. Marcus's work schedule shifted. The contractor moved to a new development that required longer hours, earlier starts. Marcus couldn't get Caleb to school on time during his weeks. He asked Shayla to adjust the handoff day. She agreed. Then the new schedule didn't work either. Marcus asked to shift again. They argued, not about the children, about the logistics, about who was bending more, about who was sacrificing more, about the math of fairness applied to a situation that no math could solve. In February 2022, Shayla's attorney sent Marcus a letter requesting a modification of the custody agreement. Primary physical custody to Shayla, with Marcus retaining alternate weekends and 1 evening per week. Marcus called Shayla. She didn't answer. He called again. She didn't answer. He called a lawyer. He couldn't afford a lawyer. The audience thought that was the peak. They were wrong. Marcus represented himself at the custody modification hearing. He wore the same Men's Warehouse suit he'd been married in. He sat at a table across from Shayla's attorney and tried to explain to a judge why he should keep equal custody of his children when his work schedule made school drop-offs inconsistent and his studio apartment had 1 bedroom, and his income had dropped because the contractor had lost a bid and cut everyone's hours by 10%. The judge granted the modification. Primary custody to Shayla. Marcus got alternate weekends, Friday evening to Sunday evening, and Wednesday dinners. He walked out of the courthouse and sat in his truck in the parking lot for 45 minutes. He called his mother. Denise answered. He said, "I lost them, Mama." Denise said, "You didn't lose them, You just got less time. Marcus said, That's the same thing. It was not the same thing. But it felt like the same thing. And feelings have their own weight. And Marcus carried that weight for the next 2 years, the way he carried everything. Silently, in his body, in the set of his jaw and the tension in his shoulders, and the way he stopped saying Caleb and Ivy's names at work, because saying them made him picture the studio apartment without them in it, and picturing that made it hard to hold a wire stripper steady. He saw his children every other weekend. He was never late. He never canceled. He brought Caleb to T-ball on Saturdays and sat in the bleachers with the other parents and answered questions about his week with lies so smooth they sounded like truth. He took Ivy to the library on Sunday mornings because she had started talking to him again, slowly, cautiously, the way a bird returns to a branch it fell from. And the library was the place where she seemed most willing to sit next to him. She liked the picture books about animals. She would point to each animal and tell Marcus its name. And Marcus would pretend he didn't know. And she would correct him with an authority so total that it made the librarian smile every time. What Marcus didn't know, what he wouldn't learn until the stage of Family Feud, was what had happened to Shayla after the custody modification. In June 2022, Shayla was diagnosed with lupus. Systemic lupus erythematosus, the kind that attacks organs, not just skin. Her kidneys were the first target. She'd been exhausted for months. She'd attributed it to the hours, the children, the weight of single parenting. When the blood work came back and the rheumatologist explained what lupus does, the immune system attacking its own body, the flares, the medication regimen, the long-term risk to kidneys, heart, lungs. Shayla sat in the examination room and thought about the metaphor she'd made at the cookout 12 years ago. Something spoiling in the sun, something turning bad while nobody was paying attention. The medication cost her $1,100 a month after insurance. She made $31,000 a year. She had 2 children. She had rent, now $1,200, because she'd moved to a bigger apartment so Caleb and Ivy each had a room. She had utilities. She had groceries. She had the co-pays for the monthly blood work. The math broke the same way Marcus's math had broken, quietly, invisibly, in the space between what a person earns and what a person needs. She didn't tell Marcus, not because of spite, not because of anger. Because telling Marcus meant admitting she couldn't do it alone, and Shayla Richardson had been the one who asked for primary custody, and she had won, and she could not bring herself to call the man she'd taken the children from and say, "I need help." Pride is a kind of sickness, too. It attacks silently. It makes the body keep standing long after the body should sit down. By 2023, the lupus had progressed to stage 3 kidney involvement. The nephrologist said dialysis was likely within 2 years. Shayla's weight dropped. Her face changed, thinner, harder. The fat pads under her eyes gone the way they go when a body is consuming itself. Caleb noticed. He was 8. He said to Marcus one weekend, "Mama looks different." Marcus said, "Different how?" Caleb said, "Like she's getting smaller." Marcus called Shayla. She didn't answer. He called again. She sent a text. "I'm fine. Stop." He stopped. And then Ivy said something that broke Marcus Devlin in a way the custody hearing hadn't. Ivy was 6. She was sitting on the library floor with a picture book about elephants. She looked up at Marcus and said, "Daddy, if Mama gets too sick to take care of us, do we come live with you, or do we go somewhere else?" Marcus's hand went still on the bookshelf. "Where did you hear Mama was sick?" Ivy said, "She takes medicine every morning and every night, and sometimes she lies on the bathroom floor, and Caleb tells me not to look." Marcus drove to Shayla's apartment that night. He knocked on the door at 9 o'clock. Shayla opened it. She looked like she weighed 112 pounds. Her wrists were thin enough that the watch she used to wear had been replaced with a hair tie to keep it from sliding off. Marcus looked at her and said, "Tell me." Shayla said, "It's none of your business." Marcus said, "They're my children too." Shayla said, "You have them every other weekend. That's what the judge said." Marcus said, "Shayla, tell me." She closed the door. Marcus sat in his truck outside her apartment for 2 hours. He didn't know what to do with the information Ivy had given him, and the door that had just closed, and the distance between a father's right to know and a mother's right to say no. He drove home. He didn't sleep. In the morning, he called Denise. Denise said, "Go back." He went back the next evening, and the next, and the next. 7 nights in a row, Marcus Devlin parked his truck outside Shayla's apartment and sat there until the lights went off. He never knocked again, he just sat. On the 8th night, Shayla came out. She was wearing a gray coat. She was carrying a glass of water. She handed him the water through the truck window and said, "You can't keep doing this." Marcus said, "Then tell me what's wrong." Shayla said, "Lupus, stage 3 kidneys. I might need dialysis." She said it fast, like pulling a bandage. Like if she said it quick enough, it wouldn't hurt. Marcus put the water in the cup holder. He said, "I'm coming back." She said, "We're divorced." He said, "I know. I'm coming back anyway." Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. Marcus Devlin's cousin Janine submitted the Devlin family for Family Feud in March 2024. The team was Marcus, Denise, Terrell, Janine, and Terrell's wife, Nicole. They were selected. Marcus told Shayla he was going to be on television. She said nothing. He didn't tell her he was going to try to win money to help with her medical bills. He didn't tell her because every time he tried to help, she said the same thing. "We're divorced." And every time she said it, Marcus heard the same translation. "You lost the right to care about me." He disagreed. He disagreed the way a person disagrees with a wall, by continuing to walk into it. What Marcus did not know was that Shayla had bought a ticket to the taping. She had flown to Atlanta with a manila envelope containing every document she'd accumulated over 2 years of lupus. The diagnosis, the medication costs, the blood work trends, the nephrologist's prognosis, the insurance denials for a biologic medication that could slow the kidney damage. The insurance company had denied coverage 3 times. First as not medically necessary, then as experimental for the patient's specific presentation, then as exceeding formulary cost limitations. Each denial was in the envelope. Each denial was a piece of paper that said, in the language of bureaucracies, "Your body is too expensive to save." She hadn't come to make a scene. She had come to watch Marcus play. She had come because Ivy had asked her, "Is Daddy going to be on TV?" And Shayla had said yes, and Ivy had said, "Can we watch?" And Shayla had thought about it for 3 days, and then bought the cheapest flight she could find and left the children with her mother and came alone. She had come because something in her, the part of her that had sat on a cooler reading Toni Morrison while a man with too much potato salad sat on the grass beside her, that part of her wanted to see him win. She had not planned to go on stage. She had planned to sit in the audience and watch and leave. But then the Devlin family won. And then Marcus went to Fast Money. And then Marcus scored 202 points and won $20,000. And the confetti fell. And Marcus grabbed Terrell and said, loud enough for the boom microphone to catch, "That's her medication. That's Shayla's medication for a year." Shayla heard it from the 4th row. She stood up. She climbed over the person next to her. She walked down the aisle. She stepped past the rope. She walked onto the set. Security moved. Steve moved faster. He put his body between them. He held up both hands. He looked at Shayla and read something in her face. Not rage, not chaos, but the specific desperation of a person who has been fighting a system alone for 2 years and has just heard, for the first time, that someone else was fighting it too. "Nobody moves," Steve said. "Tell me your name." "Shayla Richardson," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I'm his ex-wife." Steve looked at Marcus. Marcus's face was open. Not guarded, not defensive, just open. The way a face looks when a person has nothing left to protect. "She's sick," Marcus said. "Lupus. Her insurance won't cover the medication. I came here to win the money for her." The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey looked at Shayla. He looked at the envelope. "What's in there?" Shayla's chin trembled. "Every denial letter, every bill, everything they said I wasn't worth." She held the envelope out, not to Steve, not to the camera, to Marcus. "I wasn't going to come up here, but you said my name. You said it was for me, and I need you to see what they did." Marcus took the envelope. He opened it. He pulled out the first document, the insurance denial, the one that said, "Not medically necessary." He read it. His jaw tightened. He pulled out the second, the third. He read each one. His hands were steady, the electrician's hands, the hands that held wire strippers and didn't shake. They didn't shake now, but his eyes were full, and his breathing was wrong, too fast, too shallow. And Denise stepped forward and put her hand on his back, because a mother knows when her son is about to go under. Steve said, "Can I see those?" Marcus handed him the envelope. Steve pulled out the denial letters. He read them, silently, slowly, the way he reads answer cards. But this time there was no comedy to calculate and no drama to prepare. He read a piece of paper that told a 36-year-old mother of 2 that a medication that could save her kidneys was not medically necessary. He read another that called the same medication experimental. He read a third that cited formulary cost limitations. Steve put the papers down on the podium. He looked at the camera. He looked back at Shayla. He looked at Marcus. "Let me tell you something," Steve said. 30 years ago, I was living in my 1976 Ford Tempo. I had nothing. Nobody. I was sleeping in a car. And you know what was worse than the cold, worse than the hunger? It was knowing somebody I loved needed help, and I couldn't give it." Steve paused. "This man played a game show to pay for your medicine. You walked onto this stage with an envelope full of proof that the system failed you. You two are divorced, and you are standing here together. I have seen a lot of things on this stage. I have never seen this." The studio fell completely silent for the second time, but Steve wasn't done. "Marcus," Steve said, "Shayla, I need to ask you both a question, and I need an honest answer. Why did you get divorced?" Marcus said, "Because I wasn't there enough." Shayla said, "Because I stopped letting him be." Steve nodded slowly. He didn't comment. He didn't lecture. He let the 2 sentences hang in the air between a man and a woman who had just, in front of 206 strangers, diagnosed their own marriage more accurately than any counselor or courtroom ever had. Steve asked for a phone. A producer brought one without being told twice. Steve dialed a number on speaker. He called the chief medical officer of a major health insurance provider, the same company whose name appeared on Shayla's denial letters. "This is Steve Harvey. I'm on the stage of Family Feud with a woman named Shayla Richardson. She's 36 years old. She has systemic lupus erythematosus with stage 3 kidney involvement. Her rheumatologist has prescribed a biologic medication that can slow the progression. Your company has denied coverage 3 times. The reasons given were not medically necessary, experimental, and formulary cost limitations. I have the denial letters in my hand. I'm going to read them on camera, unless you can tell me right now that this woman's case will be reviewed by a human being. Not an algorithm, not a form letter, a human being who will look at her blood work and her doctor's recommendation and make a decision based on medicine, not money. The line was silent for 6 seconds. The CMO said the case would be escalated for immediate clinical review, and that he would personally ensure a decision was rendered within 72 hours. But Steve wasn't done. He put the phone down. He looked at Marcus and Shayla, standing 5 feet apart on the stage of Family Feud, the manila envelope open between them like a wound that had finally been shown to the air. "I'm going to do something I've never done," Steve said. He turned to the Devlin family. He turned to the camera. "This $20,000, this money Marcus won, I don't want it going to an insurance company. I don't want it going to a pharmacy. I want it going to these children." He pointed at Shayla. "Your medication, every prescription, every infusion, every copay, every dollar is on me, personally, for as long as you need it. The $20,000 goes into a trust for Caleb and Ivy." Marcus put both hands on top of his head. Shayla dropped her face into her hands. Denise sat down on the stage floor because her legs gave out. Terrell was leaning against the podium with his eyes closed. Nicole had her face buried in Janine's shoulder. Steve turned to the Crawford family, the opposing team from Charlotte, North Carolina, who had been standing at their podium in complete silence for the past 20 minutes, the game forgotten, the competition dissolved, every single one of them crying. Steve looked at Linda Crawford, the mother. "Ma'am, tell me what you see." Linda Crawford crossed the stage. She stopped between Marcus and Shayla. She took one of each of their hands. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Shayla. She pulled their hands together until they were holding each other's. Then she let go, stepped back, and said, "I see 2 people who never stopped being a family. The paperwork just hasn't caught up yet." The studio fell completely silent for the 4th time. Steve gave the Crawford family their own $20,000 prize. Both families stood together on the stage. Steve looked into the camera. "Everyone watching at home, I need you to hear something. Divorce doesn't mean you stop caring. A custody agreement doesn't mean you stop being a parent. And a denial letter from an insurance company doesn't mean your life isn't worth saving. Somewhere tonight, a man is sitting in a truck outside his ex-wife's apartment because he doesn't know what else to do. Somewhere tonight, a woman is carrying an envelope full of letters that tell her she's too expensive to keep alive. And somewhere tonight, 2 people who used to love each other are standing on opposite sides of a wall that neither of them built. Tear it down. It's just paper. The clip was uploaded that night. It reached 190 million views in 37 hours. Within 13 days, it passed 410 million. The hashtag #It'sJustPaper trended in 53 countries. The insurance company completed its review within 48 hours of the taping. Shayla's biologic medication was approved. The denial was reversed. The company issued a public statement citing a commitment to patient-centered review processes and announced a third-party audit of its lupus coverage determinations. Within 6 months, 14,000 lupus patients nationwide who had been denied biologic coverage received new clinical reviews. Over 8,000 were approved. The Just Paper Foundation was incorporated in November 2024. In its first year, it funded patient advocacy services for over 500 individuals who had been denied coverage for autoimmune disease medications. It established a legal clinic, staffed by health law attorneys and medical advocates, that helped patients navigate the insurance appeals process at no cost. It partnered with 8 rheumatology practices to create an automatic denial challenge protocol. When a biologic prescription was denied, the practice filed a clinical appeal within 24 hours with full medical documentation, removing the burden from the patient entirely. By the end of the second year, denial overturn rates for lupus biologics at participating practices had increased from 22% to 71%. Steve Harvey spoke about the Devlin family in an interview 14 months after the episode. He said, "I've broken up fights on this stage. I've separated families who were arguing over answers, but I have never put my body between two people and realized I wasn't stopping a conflict. I was standing in the middle of a love story that neither of them knew how to finish." Marcus Devlin played a game show to buy his ex-wife's medicine. Shayla Richardson walked onto my stage with an envelope full of denial letters because she heard him say her name. That is not a divorced couple. I don't care what the paperwork says. That is 2 people who forgot they were still a team. Marcus Devlin and Shayla Richardson are not remarried. They may never be remarried. That is not the point of this story, and Marcus will tell you so himself if you ask. The point is that Marcus still parks outside Shayla's apartment on Wednesdays. Not in the truck, not in the dark. He comes inside now. He cooks dinner for Caleb and Ivy while Shayla rests on the couch, because the medication makes her tired in a way that is different from the lupus tired. The medication tired means something is working. Marcus doesn't leave after dinner anymore. He does the dishes. He helps with homework. He carries Ivy to bed when she falls asleep on the couch. He locks the door on his way out and texts Shayla, "Locked up," and Shayla texts back one word, "Thanks." And that single word, sent from a bedroom to a truck in a parking lot, carries more weight than any sentence either of them said in a courtroom. Caleb is 9 now. Ivy is 7. Ivy still goes to the library on Sundays with Marcus. She has moved from picture books to chapter books. She is reading Charlotte's Web. She told Marcus last week that Charlotte is the best character because Charlotte does the most important thing. She writes things down so people will know the truth. Marcus asked, "What truth?" Ivy said, "That Wilbur matters. That's the whole point, Daddy. She wrote it so everyone could see." A woman walks down an aisle and steps past a rope and onto a stage because she heard her name. She is carrying an envelope full of letters that tell her she costs too much to save. A man stands at a podium holding confetti in his hair because he just won $20,000, and his first thought was her name. Between them stands a man who was not supposed to be between them. A game show host who reads answer cards for a living, but who understood in the space of a single breath that some answers are not on cards. They are in envelopes. They are in trucks parked outside apartments at 9 o'clock at night. They are in a glass of water handed through a window. They are in the word "thanks" sent from a bedroom at midnight. Some things that look like endings are just stories that haven't figured out they're still being written. The paperwork says divorced. The bodies say otherwise. The envelope is open. The wall is just paper. And paper, as anyone who has ever torn a letter in half already knows, was never strong enough to keep 2 people apart. If this story made you rethink what family really means, subscribe and turn on notifications. We tell the stories the paperwork tries to erase.